It's John Beaudin from Rock History Music, and a little bit more of Jeff Skunk Baxter. This time, it's part of our 90-minute segment with Jeff. The first time was half an hour. He has a brand new album out. There's links in the description where you can pick it up. Well, going into the Steely Dan, what was the expectation for you? I mean, you were a younger man. You helped start that band. What was the vibe like going into Can't Buy a Thrill?
Well, it was pretty exciting. We were, we didn't know what we're doing. I mean, we certainly had a lot of confidence. I'd been, a studio musician for years before that, had a lot of confidence in my playing. I loved Denny's playing, and we were really complementary in terms of our styles. So that was fun. And we just were excited about the opportunity to make a record with a band. And who knew? Nobody knew what was going to happen. There was no guarantees.
They killed me last time because I did not ask you where you got the name Skunk from. So I'm asking now.
That'll be in my book.
So that's not gotten out yet?
No, not yet.
Oh,
not yet.
You're a smart man. That's all I have to say. Bodhisattva. You did. So Denny did the first solo and you did the second on that, correct?
Yes.
So how is that decided? I mean, you just look at each other and say, you do the first one, I'll do the second one, or?
I can't remember the exact circumstances, but we always work together to try to find areas and musical places that we like to play. So, yeah, we just kind of discussed it from what I remember. Yeah.
Does the future have another Jeff Skunk Baxter solo album? Because you've opened the gates now, so I'm just curious.
I'd like to. I don't know what the future will bring, but I had a wonderful time doing this, and especially with my buddy CJ, tremendous musician, producer, engineer, keyboard player, composer, so many different things.
Was that relationship earned? Was that, sorry to interrupt you, was that one of those I mean, you told me how you first met, but I'm always curious about when two people gel together on a certain level. Sometimes it's earned, sometimes it's just like haphazard. What do you think that makes you guys work together so well?
First, I think there's an appreciation for each other.
Yeah.
That's always important. You have to have respect for and admiration for the person you're working with if you're working as a partner. I'm not talking about going to do a session. I mean, actual working together in a partnership. And we love to play together, and we love what happens. Again, whatever the bartender up there in my thalamus or hippocampus is mixing together when we play together, we'll take a little of this, serotonin, I'll add a little adrenaline here, maybe a little epinephrine, and shake it up. And whatever that is, it's pretty cool.
How'd your parents react to your success?
My dad was always very supportive, extremely supportive. Plus, he understood the whole media business. I don't know if you ever saw Mad Men. That was my dad.
Wow.
Without the issues. He was senior executive vice president of J. Walter Thompson, which at the time was the largest advertising agency in the world. So he really understood what I was doing. Yes, he had my life planned out for me in a certain way, which is what fathers do. And I've done that for my children, but the choice was mine. And certainly he was, couple of times things were rocky. I mean, you're living in a crappy apartment, you're doing gigs for nothing. And, but he was there. My mom, bless her heart, she was never quite sure what the hell I was doing. But when we played the Forum in Los Angeles with the Doobies, and I invited her to come, she got a chance to meet Cher, and now she could tell the girls at the country club that, her son was successful, I guess.
She met who? Cher? You worked with Cher, yeah.
Yeah, but Cher had come down to the show. And backstage. And so, yeah, she got to meet her. And I guess, that was the milestone for her or whatever. And again, I love my mom. She only wanted the best for me. There's no doubt about it.
With Do It Again, did you guys see? There's certain songs when I talk to artists, and it sounds so generic to say that, I know, but there's certain tunes that when I hear them for the first time, like I literally stare at the speakers. And Do It Again was one of those songs. Did you guys know that you had something there?
No. Oh my God. I mean, how do you know? You certainly are. You after you finish recording, you know whether you satisfied yourself and and the rest of your colleagues. But other than that, I think only Clive Davis had the golden ears crystal ball. So I don't know. So
well, speaking of that, is it Donald that was into Buddhism, Bodhisattva, and was he the guy that? Because that's obviously Buddhist.
I don't think it was, and I can't speak for him. I think it was as much an interest and
like Do It Again. Some people say that's, round. We're going around and around. That one too. Some people thought that was a Buddhist sort of thing.
I would defer to Donald Fagen to do that. I never want to put words in people's mouths. But there are so many things that suggest ideas for music. Dallas, which I hope one of these days you go online and have a listen to it. That was the first Steely Dan single that they pulled back because they were afraid everybody would think it was a country band.
I think I have heard it. It's just been a lot of years. By the way, what were you?
The idea for that came from Vitalis, the hair stuff.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, it wasn't about, hair conditioner or anything. It was just an idea that sparked another idea.
See, I'm stereotyping you because of the type of dude I think you are. But my thing is, I looked at you and I'm going, this guy doesn't get starstruck. But have you ever gotten starstruck from working with people? Like Ringo, did Ringo affect you?
No, he was very kind. Actually, we were doing a session with Mark Hudson. Actually, was producing. I was playing pedal steel, and at the time, that was back in the days when we had pagers. And he said, it's funny. He said something about Skunk. I got a feeling that your pager is going to go off, and I said, well, hopefully it won't. And so about halfway through the session, my pager went off and he said, it's the Pentagon, right? And just around that time, as two guys came through the studio door and says, we got to go. So he was very kind. He said, I knew it was going to happen. I had a feeling it was going to happen. Oh, we'll finish this up when you get back. But no, I've never really been starstruck. I guess it's because I've worked with so many different people in my life that I'm excited to meet people, but I've never really gone, oh my God, I'm going to meet this guy or this person, this woman today. What am I going to do? That hasn't really happened.
When you were a kid, did you have that? Is that software, nurture nature? I'm just kind of curious about that because as a kid, people are always telling you, hey, don't say, hey, Mr. McCartney, you remember? But when you're a kid, that's not always the point. When you were young, were you always comfortable in your skin like that?
Pretty much. I suppose when I was really young, my dad took me to meet Fess Parker. And I was a big, Davy Crockett fan. So all kids were, watching Disney, Walt Disney and stuff. And I got a chance to sit down with him and talk with him a little bit. And that was kind of cool, but no, not a whole lot. I don't mean to sound disingenuous. I appreciate, and I'm certainly excited by meeting people that I've always, liked to meet and look up to. But no, not so far.
Why aren't you in the picture for Stampede?
Because I was still in both bands, Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers, and was just making the transition.
Okay. Well, at first, someone had told me a long time ago when I was, before the internet, people say things. They go, "Oh, maybe Skunk can ride a horse." I'm going, "What?"
No, I grew up in Mexico. I learned to ride at a very early age.
You played pedal steel guitar on one of my favorite Doobie Brothers songs. I mean, I know you played on Captain and Me too with "Tell Me What You Want," but South City Midnight Lady, I that's just one of my, in the '70s slow songs. That's one of my favorite songs from that era.
Well, I love my baby.
Ah,
and that's
is
one
that
of them.
actually
Anyway.
it? Oh, that's not the one, is it?
No, I'm trying to remember the steel that I played on South City Midnight Ladies. I think was my Emmons D10. I think, or it was my Sierra. I'm not sure.
In this clip, Jeff "Skunk" Baxter talks about the different producers that he's worked with. Gary Katz with Steely Dan and Ted Templeman with the Doobie Brothers. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Music.
Gary was very hands-off, whereas Ted was always engaged, because being a musician himself and having a good grasp of music as well as his visions of production, he was very engaged.
Don't Stop to Watch the Wheels, Minute by Minute. One of my favorite tracks off that album. Anything you can share about that tune?
No, other than by that time, the band was so musically focused. And this is not to say that the band was never musically focused. I don't want to give that impression. But after I brought Michael into the band and we started expanding the musical horizons of the band, I had suggested to everyone that members of the band and the band as a whole work as a rhythm section in the studio for other artists. Because being a studio rat myself, I felt that there was a certain discipline that was good about that. And the fact that everybody in that band was an exceptional musician. When I say they hadn't reached their potential, I don't mean that they hadn't done an excellent job in every musical endeavor that they had participated in. But sometimes you meet people that have more to offer. And I think everybody in that band did. So I started booking sessions with them as a rhythm section with Leo Sayer and Ted booked with Carly Simon and Hoyt Axton. And to me, there was something important in the lessons that you learn when, I don't care what band you're in, downbeats at 9 o'clock. Show up at 8, get your gears set up, downbeat at 9. Here's the chart. Hear the click, let's go. And if you screw it up, you're fired. The discipline of that not being, oh, I love your music and you're such a great rock star. No, I don't care who you are. Downbeats at 9. Play it right. And I think what that did is give everyone a sense of the studio that they hadn't had before, opened up their horizons. I remember Keith Knudsen one time, we were listening back to something on the Minute by Minute record. And no, it was on the Living on the Fault Line record, which I think was an amazing record. Someday people, I think, will appreciate how cool that is. Yeah, very exploratory. So Keith said, oh God, I dropped a snare drum beat in bar 51. I went, bingo. Now, you see, before it was, a great track. We had a great time. I was really rocking. No, I dropped a snare drum beat in bar 51. The mindset of that way to listen to things and that way to approach was, to me, where I thought everybody should go, because they could. Everybody was such an excellent musician.
Are you, first of all, did your parents both Are your parents around? Or your mother's not? You said. Right?
Oh, my mom passed away a few years ago. My dad passed away about 12, 13 years ago.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate it.
So did they get a chance to see you working for the government?
My dad did. Absolutely.
What was his reaction?
Well, was extremely happy for me.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details because we're talking about things that are classified and stuff, but I never knew what my dad really did because I didn't have any clearances when I was a kid. Then when he retired, he didn't have any clearances and I couldn't tell him what I was doing. So a 4-star general, or he's a 3-star at the time, I went to him and I said, "Sir, can if I give you my dad's DD 214, which is his Department of Defense documents, can you get him a high-level security clearance for 24 hours?" And he said, "Sure, I'll do it." So then my dad and I went into a SCIF, which is a secure compartmentalized intelligence facility, and sat down and started to talk. And it was amazing. I had no idea. And he had no idea. And then, of course, I took him to the Pentagon a couple of times when I was there, and people are walking down the hall and go, "Hey, Loy, how you doing?" I'm going, "Oh, man. All right. We got to talk.
Oh, my God.
We got to talk."
That's great. When you were with the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan stages, were you reading as much then?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I love to read, and it's just what. And if I have a question, I guess now people go on the internet as much as possible and try to find the answers. But at the time, there was really no internet other than what was happening over at ARPA and the national labs. So it was books. Books.
How'd you get the gig with that? You did one show with Elton John, right?
Yes.
Because I asked Kenny Passarelli, and I remember I talked to him off and on, and I talked to him now and then, and I emailed him and I says, "What? There's this picture, and there's Jeff Skunk Baxter," and I said, "How many shows?" And he said, "I don't remember 2." So how did that happen?
Reggie came to one of the shows that we did with the Doobie Brothers, and it was in London, and he jammed with us. He played. A tremendous guy, wonderful musician, and just an all-around great guy. And so afterwards, he had asked me if I would be willing to join his band because he was going to put something brand new together for the Captain Fantastic and Brown Dirt Cowboy. Davey Johnson was going to stay on, but he was going to put together a new band. I said, "Unfortunately, I really have made this commitment to the Doobie Brothers, but however I can help, you just tell me and I'll help." So he said, "Well, will you at least do the Captain Fantastic Brown Dirt Cowboy performance at Wembley? Because I want to perform the whole record." I said, "Of course, man. Absolutely." And that's kind of how that came about. He asked, and I said, "Here's what I can do."
Yeah, he sped everything up, I noticed, but people do with those kind of songs, and it's a normal thing. And it's now, of course, an extra on Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. It's the second disc when you buy it. I don't know if I asked you last time. Did I ask you the dentist's office, the doctor's office question? I'm not sure if I did, because I do so many interviews that sometimes I forget what I've asked someone.
Fair enough.
But if you're at a doctor's office, if someone says, "What do you do?" How do you answer that question? Do you open that door? Because I mean, obviously, if you say you're a musician, do you do anything that I would know? And all of a sudden, the energy changes, not in a bad way necessarily. It's like a party. Do you want to go there? What if someone doesn't know who you are and they say, "What do you do?" How do you answer the question?
I'm a professional musician and a national security SME, subject matter expert.
So what do they say after? What do they ask you after?
Well, then I don't tend to be, wear a T-shirt says it's Jeff Skunk next. They said, "Well, have you done anything I've ever heard to?" I said, "Well, yeah, I started a band called Steely Dan, and then I played in the Doobie." Oh, then the conversation opens up, but I don't open up with, "Hey, I'm this really cool guy who's played in these bands. I just find that slightly distasteful.
Well, also reputation is someone else's business. I always say, I always go, you're not in charge of your rep, someone else will decide whether right or wrong what you are. So it's a question that's come up a lot. It's interesting. So many musicians I know say, I never lead with that. I can't lead with that kind of thing. If someone wants to say who I am, that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to approach it.
Yeah.
I mean, the way you want to do things, or the way I like to do things, is you try to start on as a level playing field as possible. That eliminates a number of biases, except for obviously the neuropassive linguistics when you first meet somebody. That's a fancy word for body language, etc. But no, I was thinking about the doctor's office. Used to go to a dentist. His nickname was Smoke. Really cool guy, and he knew I was a musician, so we set up a really nice music listening system in his office. So, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you how to titrate the nitrous oxide. So I trust you. You understand chemistry and physics. So here's how you do it. And when I come back, you're going to be ready." I said, "You bet." Okay, about 20 minutes later, I'm ready. I got the headphones on, beautiful set of headphones, and I'm listening. And then they start to operate. They start to do the thing. And I gather about 45 minutes into it, all of a sudden they're ripping all the stuff off my face and the mask and everything. And I'm going, "Wow, what's happening?" I says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. What's the matter?" "Well, you got tears streaming down your face. Are you in pain?" I said, "No, I'm into the second movement of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. You just ruined this for me." So yeah, exactly. Says, okay. Well, let's get right back to it. Now we know. Okay, so
we start with Jim Gordon, who played with Steely Dan, Linda Ronstadt, Tom Petty, John Lennon, Beach Boys. He was in sessions with Bread, Jackson Browne, The Byrds, Eric Clapton, Alice Cooper, Neil Diamond, the Everly Brothers, Hall & Oates, George Harrison, and many more. He had some psychological problems and actually murdered his mom. The problem at the time, undiagnosed schizophrenia. He remains in jail to this day. By the way, what do you think happened to Jim Gordon? Like, that's just talk about.
Gosh, that is such a sad story. I haven't talked to him in quite a while. I did go visit him a couple of times, but I haven't talked to him. And that's a good idea. As we get older, sometimes it's just you have to do the right thing. Sometimes you get so much on your plate you forget to do the right thing. Thanks for reminding me. I'm gonna look into that.
I think with that sort of thing, that I don't think anyone doesn't know anybody who's gone off the rails like that, or sometimes it's one thing after another thing that just can. But a lot of people were asking me to ask you, because how was he? Can you say anything? I don't want to pry, but
well, and again, I'm very careful about. I'm not real good at gossip, and I don't answer a lot of questions about the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, my family, other people, simply because I know how to keep a secret.
Yeah,
it's part of my job. But I just don't find it at all fulfilling or even necessary to get into the sort of the dirt stuff. So I don't really know a lot about the actual circumstance. What I do know is that every time I work with Jim Gordon, it was a joyful experience. As a drummer, no, as a musician who also played drums, being in the same room with him and playing with him was amazing. It was kind of like, I guess, what the Pied Piper would have been. You get behind him and it's going to go great.
Henry Dodge says, I think I remember he was going to run for political office at one point.
Yes. Well, I think so. Yeah. I woke up one day and my dad called me up and said, "What the hell is this?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "Front page of the New York Times. It says you're running for Congress." I went, "Oh, really?" Okay. So I made a couple of calls. I called some of the folks in the RNC. I said, "What's this?" I said, "Well, we thought you might want to run for Congress." "Well, next time, tell me." But yeah, okay, I'll explore it. And it was one of the most insane experiences, the preliminary stuff I'd ever seen. The the level of blood sport was so brutal, and the opposition was so desperate. I remember getting a call. I'm not even going to go into it, but they were. It had to do with them going to go after my kids, and I thought, I don't, I'll do a better job for my country doing what I'm doing, and I'm not really interested in what to me seemed to be a horror show. Would I ever consider it? I don't think so. I'm too old for one thing. I think.
Speaking of too old, though, you don't strike me as a guy, and I'm not either. I mean, you've got a few years on me, but I'm 62, and people ask me, "You're going to retire in 3 years?" And we're why? I like. My dad was 65. He sat in a rocking chair and basically started to disintegrate in a rocking chair. So, what's your take on that?
Well, I was doing gigs with Les Paul. He was 94, 93, 94 years old. You kidding? Maybe he didn't have the dexterity, but it didn't make any difference because the thermonuclear fire inside him always came out, was like the sun. And no problem. And some of the people that I work with, especially in my day job, are 85, 86 years old and sharp as tacks.
Yeah.
And they have all of that wonderful storehouse of knowledge. Hopefully, whatever I've learned and gained over the years, I can share. And I agree with you. I think once you stop using your mind, it's just you're on the clock.
This time around, Jim Hodder, who was the original drummer for Steely Dan. Jim passed away June 5th, 1990. One more drummer. Jim, you brought Jim into Steely Dan, correct?
Jimmy Hodder. Oh, man, what a drummer. What a drummer. You listen to that stuff.
Yeah.
And I have a number of my drummer friends said, who played drums? And I said, Jimmy Hodder. Well, who's Jimmy Hodder? Well, Jimmy Hodder was actually in a band called the Beat Game in Boston. That's where I met Gary Katz, who eventually asked me to do some work with Walter Becker and Donald Fagen. And Jimmy was the drummer in that band. That guy, there are some really underrated, unappreciated musicians on the planet. Tyran Porter is one, probably one of the most exquisite bass players I've ever played with, other than John Entwistle. Definitely in that category. Oh man, when you hear his playing, it's just scratching the surface. And the same with Jimmy Hodder. His drumming, talk about inviting. It was compelling. And you listen to that stuff, most of it without a click. And it's amazing. Plus, he was a great singer. And I don't know if you ever heard the original single that Steely Dan put out called Dallas, but Jimmy sang that. What a great voice. What an incredible voice. Amazing musician.
And he was, after a while, his role was, speaking of Jim Gordon and Jeff Porcaro, his role just, did he leave?
Yeah, bands are like families. The dynamics of any set of personal relationships, from a mathematical point of view, it's an entropic phenomenon bound by a set, like a band or a family. But what happens inside is entropy, to say the least. So I'd say it was a function of that.
When I watched the first time I watched the Woodstock, You Know What's Coming, the Woodstock footage, when I saw Richie play, it's the first time as a young teenager that I ever felt the hypnotic feeling of watching another human being play music. It just hypnotized me. I remember what I was doing. I'm surprised I don't remember what I was wearing, but you worked with him. What was that like?
I love that guy. We actually met at Woodstock and we became friends because I did a number of sessions for him as well. He would call me and have me come in and do some work for him. And I even had the Doobies come in and do some work actually as a rhythm section. Just one of those guys, again, kind of like Joni, just spiritual, unpretentious, sincere. And then one day he called me and said, Skunk, I got this call to do a jingle commercial. And he said, I don't want to really sell out. I said, how much are they offering you for it? And so he gave me the thing. I said, Richie, I do jingles all the time. All the time. It's great money and it's fun. It's a 30-second or a 60-second hit record. It's a challenge like anything else. Just go do it. You'll have a great time. And he called me about a month later and he said, that was so much fun. I'm going to start doing a lot more. I said, good for you. Good for you. Why not? You're talented. You've been blessed with a capability that most people don't have. You have a gift for channeling, if you would, bringing ideas and thought and emotions to other people. What the heck? I mean, if you don't want to do it because you don't like the product, that's one thing. But come on, man, have fun. And so he started doing a ton of jingles after that. And so he would always call me every time he did one. He says, "Oh man, it was really fun." And he would describe it to me. That's a wonderful human being.
It's amazing how some people sometimes will fight or will have preconceived ideas about something. And then when they do it, and because sometimes we get so hell bent on certain, our story or what we're supposed to think about something. And then you think, well, yeah, have you tried it? Well, no, I haven't tried it. Well, give it a shot.
Well, it's like the 60s certainly was a mindset.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll sell out to the man. I can't do that. Okay. Whatever, whatever. Like anything else, you get to a point in your life where you finally outgrow. You don't have to read Herman Hesse for the 90th time, and you have read the Book of the Dead once, and you're over that, and you've put away your collection of Lawrence Ferlinghetti poetry, and now you're starting to think because you have a kid, you have insurance, you got to pay the rent, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, speaking of that, you worked with you worked with Jeff Porcaro as well.
Yes.
That there's I talk to the Toto guys a lot more than most bands. Any memories of him?
Lots of memories. Jeff and I, did a ton of sessions together. It's in the studio in LA. And a wry sense of humor, never down. And his sense of humor was because when you're in the studio, I mean, there's some crazy stuff that happens. Number one, if you're first call, which I'm proud to have been, those guys, there's a certain camaraderie, and there's also a certain cockiness. I mean, you're there because you're the pro from Dover. There's nothing you can't do. Or if there is, you're not going to say it, and you're going to do it anyway. So every time I worked with him on any session, there was this tremendous wave of confidence, like with everybody else that I worked with. And Jeff had good jokes. He was like Jay Graydon. He had good jokes. And I think about
Hal Blaine?
Hal Blaine. Jokes. Constant.
Really?
So Jeff had some good ones. But his playing was, how can I describe this? Was inviting. In other words, some players play in a box. And, it's nice that you're there, but, he's here, you're here, you're here. Jeff's playing was inviting. His playing style was like an open book. So when you played with him, you could peer into the structure of what he was doing. And besides the fact that it was just great, no matter what, it was joyous, it was fun. There was never, yeah, we did a lot of serious work, but we never obsessed about it. And he was, like I say, very inviting, and it was wonderful to play with him.
I'm always curious about running into people who, like, my wife has grit. I don't have that as much. And only in the last couple of months have I been working constantly, and I'm inspired by it, but I don't know what did it. I'm not really sure, but I'm curious to look at some people where Shannon opens a file and she has to, Asperger's people sometimes, or even autistic people. I watch my daughter, who's autistic and 24. She has to open the file, but she has to close that file. And there's some people who it's like homework. They don't want to do that file. And I always call it grit, but you sound like a guy. Do you have a lot of files open, or do you like to close the file?
It depends. It depends. It depends on what I'm doing. Sometimes it's important to keep a number of files open. So if you're thinking on non-linear levels, right, you can tap into things immediately. And by the way, I hate the word autism. I believe that label is given to people that the average person doesn't understand, and therefore has to give it a label. I have a number of friends who have kids in the spectrum. Some of them are amazing at what they do. Do you know that at GCHQ, which is the British version of the National Security Agency, the NSA, the Crippies out there, they hired 15 gentlemen between the age of about 20 and 30 who are in the spectrum, and they're the best cryptologists they've ever had. So I didn't mean to get off topic here, but
no, that's good.
I hate it when people use labels, number one, that they don't understand, number two, that they apply because they're afraid as opposed to understanding. And so I might be in the spectrum. I don't know. I'm slightly dyslexic, which is fantastic, because that way when I'm watching somebody play guitar, it makes perfect sense to me. I'm good. Oh yeah, I'm good. So I see it as an advantage. I see many of these things as advantages. So yes, I try to keep files open most of the time. There are times when you really have to concentrate, and you close everything else, and you focus hard.
By 76, when Michael McDonald came in, I mean, from the inside, because you'd played with him for a while then, even as a guest, and then Stampede, you were a full-time member. But by the time Taking It to the Streets came out, from the inside, what were you seeing for reaction? Because I liked Michael McDonald. I had no problem. I'm one of those guys of going, what happens if you press this? What happens if you go through that door? They went through another door, and Patrick Simmons was still there. And a few of the other guys, of course.
Well, my reaction in the beginning was, I think I made the right decision by bringing him in the band. It was a crapshoot like everything else. You got to make a command decision every once in a while, and the situation was such that somebody had to do something.
What was it? But I didn't phrase it right. What was the reaction of the other guys? Sorry, with your suggestion.
Well, there was really a very little time. It was like when you jump out of an airplane and you say, "What's your reaction when your chute opens?" You go, "This is good." You really don't have much time to think about it, and the ground's coming up pretty quick. The reaction was good because it was very quick. I mean, I literally sent Michael a plane ticket to New Orleans to come and rehearse, because we were going to do a show that we had canceled in 10 days from when I called Michael. And so when he showed up and played with the band, everybody really enjoyed it. I mean, he's a great musician. They loved his voice. He was and still is really easygoing. So there was no tension, friction, conflict. It went amazingly well. We went out to play that show after we rehearsed for like 8 days, and we got 5 encores. So something must have worked.
Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, I asked him this question that's coming up, and he said, well, once a fan sent, because everyone loves hearing this, threw a used tampon at me, and it fell down, of course, and I looked down and I felt pressure and I thought I was shot. He says, what's the craziest thing a fan ever did to you?
Wow. Gee.
Do people have preconceived ideas because of your, you look like the ultimate dude, and the people think you're a certain way? Because I have to admit, when I found out that you were a brainiac,
I don't know about that, but you're very kind.
But I was pleasantly surprised, and I remember going, "Well, I put this." Because when I first saw you, obviously I thought, oh, that guy's a dude. That guy's a dude. Like, and then of course I started really researching you when I was younger, and I went, my God! I started paying attention. I'm a drummer. I'm not a guitarist. So I remember changing and I went, oh God, I've judged people, but you look like the ultimate rocker. You look like a dude.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment.
It is.
I'll take anything as a compliment. I can't really remember anything that fans have done. You certainly get some strange letters from both males and females. And of course, I have to be careful because I'm not good at the pronouns. So I don't mean to offend anyone. I did get sucker punched once.
Why?
I'm not quite sure. But
like from a fan?
I don't know. It was after a sound check. Then I'd walked out into the parking lot of where we were playing, and I just got sucker punched. Now I grew up in Mexico,
right? So
as a gringo in a country where some people liked you and some people didn't, you learned very quickly to take care of yourself. And so he did sucker punch the wrong guy, because he instead of running away, he stayed there. Probably wasn't the best decision he'd ever made. But for the most part, people do things, even if it's crazy, mostly because they want to connect with you. I think people throw things on stage and throw things at you and stuff. It's not because they're being mean. They're trying to figure out a way to reach out and connect. I don't see it as being hostile.
But that's unconscious, though, for the most part. Do you think they're really conscious of that? Because I've done. No. I mean, I used to when I first got into radio, I'd ask a question. I'm going, why do people laugh they go to a funeral and they laugh because they don't know how to deal with whatever it is, the
That's
emotion
correct.
they've got, right?
Most people don't have the level of self-awareness that is necessary to be able to do the personal analysis to really understand what their psychological makeup is and what their drivers are, what their impetus is. And of course, very few people don't understand the whole concept we talked about neurotransmitters and how all that works, and being able to get outside above that to be able to see it from an objective point of view and not be a victim of being inside it, but understanding it from the outside.
Has there been one or two sessions that were in your past that were tough, like hard for whatever reason, through, I don't know, anything stand out? Sometimes it's the artist not explaining themselves. I don't know. It could be anything, but
there's sometimes there's challenges. You work with people who are never happy with anything. And so obviously you have to do, your job is to make them happy, not make yourself happy. And there's some tough gigs. There's one gig that I did with CJ Vanston, who is my partner on this project, where the jingle producer came in and he just handed us the sheet music, which had a time signature, tempo, key signatures and 64 bars with no music. He said, okay, you guys ready? Yeah, roll it. And I had just met CJ before. And the reason, obviously, that we work together now is because on that session, we just made it up as we went. And the client, it was for Hyatt Hotels. And the client liked it. And we looked at each other and I said, well, if I ever do a solo record, I definitely want to do it with you because obviously there's something going on here. And there were some crazy sessions. David Campbell was a wonderful arranger, among other things. We were doing a movie soundtrack. I'm not quite sure who it was for, but he was in a rush. He said, I'm calling you. I got to do this now. I'm up against a deadline. Come in. You got it. Okay. Yep. I'll show up. So I showed up and it was 18 pages of music. And so I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put up like 12, 14 music stands and we'll tape everything together and we'll lay it across and I'll sit in this stool that has wheels and you're going to wheel me down the line and I'll play the charts, but you got to wheel me down the line so I can read this stuff and, and do this and get this done. And so that's fine. Now, whatever it takes, that was the tough one because it was really challenging, reading it and playing it and trying to do it in one take. And then, it's just going down the line here. It's like an assembly line. So there were some tough sessions. There were sessions with producers that were very strange. I did a session for Pia Zadora, who was a wonderful lady, not a bad singer, wonderful lady, but her producer was a mean and nasty guy. So we decided that he was yelling at her too much, and we had to fix that. So, and I'm not going to name the producer. He's long passed on, but so we put a harmonizer. We strapped the harmonizer into the patch bay into the monitors and clicked it 1 cent. So everything he played back in the studio sounded great. As soon as he took it home, it sounded like crap. So about 3 or 4 days of this, he said, I don't understand. It's impossible. And we said, we know what the problem is. We know what the problem is. And we looked at each other going, yep, we know what the problem is. We're going to have to get the isometric paralyzer. He says, what is that? I said, well, there's only 2 of them in the world. There's one in Japan, but I think we can get a hold of one here. Oh, yeah, well, how much is I said it's going to be about 25, 30 grand. Rent this thing. And he says, I don't care. Rent it. I need to fix this. So basically, he shows up the next day, and the tech in his studio, he's got his headphones on, he's got all the oscillators up, stuff's working, stuff's spinning around, he says, okay, I think I finally got it. Basically, all I did was, pull the patch from the patch bay. But okay, I think we're ready to go now. So we play it back and everything sounds really good. And he goes, oh, thank God. Thank God everything good. And she writes us a check for 30 grand. So we go to Pia and we say, listen, here, we don't want the money. We just hate this guy. And we hate the fact that he was yelling at you and making you cry. And she said, keep the money. I hate him. I didn't know what to do. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So you never know. You never know what's going to happen when you walk in the studio.
That is the wildest story I've ever heard. Donna Summer. I talked to Bruce Sedano a couple of just before her widower husband, just before, and it's strange. When I was a rocker, a lot of my friends still like Donna Summer. There was something about her that was different than other people of that ilk that did that type of music, but they still like Donna Summer. It's interesting. I know you worked with her. What was that experience like?
Well, again, I never want to take credit for anything. I always think I'll let other people figure that out. But when I got the call from Giorgio Moroder, the producer, saying, I want you to come and play on the record. And I said, what kind of music is it? He said, it's disco. I said, call Jay Green. because Jay and I had been doing so many disco records together. We actually would get together at Martoni's on a Monday and figure out what was going to be the one riff that we were going to play through all the disco tunes for the rest of the week. Not to say, I don't mean to sound disingenuous, but it was a little bit formula. So when he called me, he called Jay, and Jay said, nah, call Skunk. So Giorgio called me back and said, I really want you to play on this record. I went, okay, it's disco. I said, and he said, you can play whatever you want. Okay. I mean, I'll play the chart, obviously. I'm happy to do that, but okay. So I at the time, very interesting time. I was moving. I was coming back off a tour, and I just didn't have any guitars. So I was on my way to the session. I figured I'll stop off at Guitar Center and buy something. So I stopped off at Guitar Center, and Paul Herman sees me coming in and goes, whoa. Because usually when I would come in the store, because I was building and repairing guitars as well for other people, I'd usually find a guitar, smash it against the wall and go, hey, this is broken. Sell it to me for parts. And Paul knew exactly what I was doing. I mean, we were friends. So he said, well, what do you need, a guitar? And I said, yeah, I need something for the session. And we went to the center of the guitar store, Guitar Center in Hollywood, and there's a box that said, buy me $25. And there were about 5 or 6 guitars in that box. So I kind of and I found this Burns Bison guitar. So in the box for $25 was this with and I haven't changed anything. It only has 5 regular tuning machines and 1 Gibson Cluson Deluxe tuning machine. And it was a Burns Bison Jr. Picked it up, played it, said, okay, give me $25 for it. And so I took that, grabbed a 6-pack of Budweiser, went down to Rusk Studios, went in, and they played a couple of songs for me. One was Hot Stuff. And Giorgio said, Skunk, I want you to do what you do. I said, okay, Giorgio, roll it. And that was it. I did 3 or 4 rhythm parts, and then the solo. Cranked the studio deluxe reverb up all the way to 10 everywhere, and plugged the guitar and just went for it. And then he said, I like this. I want you to play on more songs. So Giorgio was also very interested in technology, and Jürgen Kopfers and Harold Faltermeyer. Jürgen was the engineer and Harold was the keyboard player. We're also big techno freaks. And I had been working for Roland for a number of years. I still do. I've been there for 47 years now. Wow. And working on the guitar synthesizer. And so I brought the prototype of the guitar synthesizer into the studio. And I mean, basically, it was just a piece of plywood with a lot of wires and circuit stuff. It was still a prototype. But what the hell, So I plugged it in, and Giorgio said, what's that? I said, the guitar synthesizer. He goes, I want that. So we put up Bad Girls. And I said, I want you to do solo on Bad Girls. Okay, roll the tape. And so that solo is, I think, the first guitar synthesizer solo on anything. And again, it was still a prototype. So we used it throughout the record. Harold loved it because he was such a techno freak anyway, And so and that was before MIDI. So I would plug the control voltage and gate outputs into his stuff, and we were just having a great time. But that record, Giorgio had explained to me afterward, the reason that he called me because he wanted it to rock. He did not want it to be a disco records per se. Going back, sorry, it took me a little while to get back to your point. And I think that's what I did, is turn that into much more of a rock piece of music. So yeah, I think I did have some influence on on Donna's, the face that she presented. And Bruce, by the way, is a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
I did some work on his band, and an incredible musician too, by the way. It's really, really talented cat. So
one of the nicest guys I've ever interviewed.
Absolutely. You bet. You betcha.
Sherry Thomas, as any band member from Steely Dan or Doobie Brothers ever approached you to come back?
We did in the Doobie Brothers. We did a couple of farewell shows. You know how it is. You're never going to do it again. And of course, like I guess the manager for the Eagles said to them when they said they'd never play together again. They said, "How's 64 million a piece net sound to you?" Went, okay. I had to do it for the money. I'm just saying that there's motivation on all levels. And I remember doing those, and that's about it, because Steely Dan really, it's not so much a band, I think, now as it's a concept. It's Donald Fagen doing whatever he does. And the Doobie Brothers, I think, wanted to go back to their, as you've said, their kind of original roots. And certainly it makes sense to have Michael do that, because he was singing probably on the most successful records that the Doobie Brothers did. So that's it for me. Besides, it's about time. How much time do you have? I really wanted to do this solo project. And between that, still working for Roland, designing instruments, doing some production, and of course my day job, which is getting crazier every day, I'm pretty happy.
Did you ever do that with cars? I just talked to Lou Graham an hour ago, and he has still 5 classic cars. But did you ever go that route? Were you a car lover?
I love Detroit metal, and I'm a fan. And since I grew up in Mexico, I learned a lot about cars very early, because in a lot of ways, like Cuba, people kept their cars and kept them in repair as opposed to buying a new one, because mostly they couldn't afford it. So I tore down a number of cars, learned to have a huge love for Chevy Mouse, 377 small block, a lot of those, Ford 302s, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Totally silly. What's the deal with everyone asking me about the Muppet character that looks like you?
My best guess is I did a lot of studio work for Sesame Street, and Jim Henson. I think when they decided to have a band, a Muppet band, they picked the different folks that were in the studio band and made caricatures of them. So I see some of my colleagues in that band, Mike Baird, Animal drummer,
Yeah.
And David Foster playing keyboards. I think that's where it all came from.
In high school, what kind of a teenager were you, and what were you listening to in high school?
So high school, okay, I went to boarding school.
Okay. That age group.
Prep school, yeah, 13 to like 18, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I was listening to everything.
Like all genres.
All genres. Because my roommate from the last 2 years was the bass player in the band that we had at school, which was a really good band. It was so good that we were getting asked to play at all the different girls' schools around the area. And because we were young and crazy and was already getting into trouble, the dean of students became our manager and booked the band so he could keep an eye on us. And we gave him 5%. It was great. It was fantastic. But we were listening to everything. And one of the musical Bibles that I had under my arm was Howard Roberts, Color Him Funky, and HR is a dirty guitar player. I learned and transcribed every single note of all of that stuff. And then later on, I got a chance to meet Howard, and actually we taught together at the Guitar Institute of Technology. But I also listened to classical music. I listened to everything because in Mexico, Mexico was a very eclectic place musically. Everything from oompa bands to rock and roll. The Mexican rock bands were great. I played in a number of Mexican rock and roll bands. Great drummers. That's when I made Abraham Laboriel. We had a surf band together when we were kids. I was 11, he was 12.
What?
You know, yeah, called the Tarantulas. Yeah, growing up in that kind of eclectic atmosphere, my dad's record collection, my mom's record collection, I brought a lot of that with me. So I listened to everything.
So you were known as a music guy in high school, obviously. I mean,
oh yeah.
Did you? You weren't allowed to have a mustache and beard back then, were you?
No.
I don't think I've ever seen a picture of you without your.
And my grade point average was 6.0 because all I wanted to do was practice. That's it. And then when I got into trouble playing, they took away my guitar. And you know how that is.
Take away the thing he loves.
Yeah. So I said, okay, then we're not going to play any more school dances. And after one semester, the student body got together and petitioned the other dean of students and said, this sucks because nobody would go to the dances. I mean, yeah, they wanted to meet girls, but it was no fun. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay. And that's when the other dean said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be your manager. I'll drive you to the gigs in the pickup truck. We'll go do the work. I said, well, you should take some money for it. He said, I'll take 5%.
Richard Skelly says, further to a number of other comments, I believe Jeff largely taught himself the rudiments of missile delivery technology and then came up with the bright idea of how to improve the efficiency of missiles.
Generally, that's true. I guess I was sort of an autodidact, still am. I spent a tremendous amount of time reading defense publications because as I was working in the technology areas for Roland and Akai and Fender and Gibson and Audio-Technica and these different companies, in the beginning of the digital revolution, the bow wave for all of that, frankly, was in the military. The military had the money and the time and the need to do the research and development into digital technologies. So I was reading all of that, and as I was reading it, I was gaining a lot of knowledge about defense systems in general. And one day, I ran into Nick Cook, who Nick was the senior aviation editor for Jane's Defense Weekly in London. We had friends in common, and he gave me an article that said you could track the space shuttle with an S-band radar. A radar, I'm not sure everybody understands exactly how it works, but it's pretty simple. You send an electronic signal at a particular frequency out, and if it bounces back, you can detect that, and also with some good technology, you can actually glean information from it. So the S-band is there's L-band, there's R-band, there's X-band, there's S-band, there's different parts of the frequency spectrum, the different radars. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. Track of an S-band radar. The Navy uses an S-band radar in their air defense system. So then I went over to talk to a buddy of mine over at JPL, Caltech, and said, John, can you do some math for me? And he said, yeah, okay. So I gave him some time, and he come back and says, what are you trying to do? He says, it looks like you're looking to track something that's not the space shuttle. And I said, well, here's the radar cross section. Here's the mass, here, stuff. And I said, can I do what I want to do? And he said, yep. So then I wrote a paper on how to convert that Navy air defense system into doing missile defense. and then gave it to a congressman that I was working with, especially on the counterterrorism area. When I was with LAPD, I was on their anti-terrorism division, and he sent it to the vice chairman of the Armed Services Committee. When I said, "What is this guy from Lockheed or Boeing or Raytheon or something?" No, he's a guitar player for the Doobie Brothers. So I get a call, and he says, "Would you be willing to serve on the Armed Services Committee as a consultant for missile defense?" I said, "Okay." Said, "Well, I hope so, because we just classified your paper, and now you have to come and go through all the kabuki. But you're going to come here. You're going to TDY to the Pentagon. You're going to work for General Mal O'Neill over at the Strategic Defense Initiative Organization, and you're going out to Lawrence Livermore to work on Brilliant Pebbles." I said, "Okay, great. I'm in. Sounds fun to me."
That is crazy.
No.
True. Well, yeah, but to a guy like me, I mean, someone had asked me, can you ask him to explain it a little bit more? I know it's way more complicated than that, the work you do, but I'm pleasantly happy by some of the fans that asked about that side of your life, because I always go, "Oh, tell me about Reeling in," or whatever, some song, any song, or Minute by Minute by the Doobies. But the fact that they were interested, I thought, good on you guys. You know what I mean? I like that.
Well, and it's not that rare. I mean, certainly at the time, I was probably one of the few people that was doing that. I mean, Hedy Lamarr, she came up with the concept for the frequency hopping radar. Her husband was a physicist, but she came up with the concept.
Why do people, you think, let me interrupt you for a second. Why do people, with Hedy Lamarr especially, I remember listening to a phone call that it's on YouTube. And I remember listening to this long interview that he was doing with her. And I think it was that interview that she said, people still don't believe that I did that. And I'm going, why?
Because they have a problem believing it, because they don't fit in to the mold, the vision that they have, and their ability to conceive past that.
Did you get that a little bit? Because you're just.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Sure. What do you know about anything? You're just a dumb guitar player. Yeah, all right. Well, that's fine. You do what you do. Paul Rivera is from Rivera Amplifiers, been doing work with the Air Force. Brian May got his PhD in astrophysics. His thesis coach was a good friend of my ex-boss at Lawrence Livermore, who just left University of Rochester Physics Department. Paul Reed Smith, do you know Paul Reed Smith, the guitar builder? His dad was one of the founders of Raytheon, Jack Smith. He came to me one day and I said, "I have this idea for underwater acoustic detection." I said, "Okay, well, let's look at it." I looked at it and went, "Okay." Pick up the phone, called Admiral Carr over at the Office of Naval Research. They said, "Nev, you got to check this out." So we brought everything down there. They checked it out. We put it out on a ship, and bingo, kicked ass. So now he has a company called Digital Harmonic that does a number of things, a lot of work with some government contract. So I think the fact that musicians and John Boyd, who came up with the OODA loop concept. Are you familiar with the OODA loop? It's a little algorithm for problem solving called observe, orient, decide, and act. It's applicable to just about anything, from cleaning dog poop off a blanket to figuring out how to do a radar intercept. He came up with a concept called creation and destruction, analysis and synthesis, where you break things down into a problem into its smallest components and put it together in a different way. Perfect example, Pachelbel's Canon, which you've heard 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah. I used to play it on the radio. Yeah.
Yeah, and the nice lady in the white thing with the harp at the wedding. Yeah, okay. But Let It Be Me by the Everly Brothers and When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge, that's Pachelbel's Canon. It's the same song. It's even in the same key. Somebody and now analyzed its small parts and reassemble it in a different way. And the one thing musicians can do, and John Boyd knew about this and understood this, is they think in a nonlinear fashion. They apply a multi-level template to everything they do. Because if you're playing music, you're thinking about melody, time, tempo, you're reading, you're listening to lyrics, you're digging back into your vocabulary. I mean, you're thinking on multiple levels at the same time. Yeah. That gives you the tools to solve problems that in a nonlinear way that many people don't have. That's why my first grandson, I made sure that he was wearing headphones an hour a day listening to Mozart, because I wanted to wire his brain because of the cadences and the way that Mozart had constructed the musical template that he used to construct his music was beneficial to rewiring the brain to be able to think in a nonlinear fashion.
Is that why the Mozart effect, that whole series?
Yes, and people say, well, that's bullshit. Well, no, it's not, because the power of music is such, people don't really understand. See, the problem is everybody's a drug addict. They don't understand that they are addicted to epinephrine, adrenaline, vasopressin, oxytocin, serotonin. These drugs, which are the neurotransmitters in your brain, are the cocktails. The results of the cocktails, the different ones, define your emotions. So you know what music can do. My God, after they played Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, they burned the goddamn church down. And when they performed Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, they looted 6 blocks of downtown Paris. Scared the crap out of everybody. So much vasopressin and adrenaline. Fear brought on by a mixture of frequencies. And this is a whole other discussion we can get to. Charlie Towns, the inventor, the guy that won the Nobel Prize for inventing the laser. He and I were colleagues together at Livermore. Human spirit, coherent oscillation. That's a whole other discussion. But the emotional part of all this, the ability to think, and the neurotransmitters that promote that. Some people are able to secrete those neurotransmitters and help them apply a template for nonlinear thinking. And those people are definitely musicians.
Wow.
Because if you look at what a musician has to do, there's nothing linear about that.
Can you, if I'm interested in this whole thing, is there a book I should read on this?
Yeah. It's the biography of Lieutenant Colonel John Boyd by Robert Curran. And it's an interesting book. It's about a young man who joined the Air Force, didn't have a superbly high EQ, managed to invent the OODA loop, managed to, he told the fighter pilots that they're a bunch of wusses. Air combat has nothing to do with anything other than managing energy management algorithms. Wrote a table. They call him 40-second Boyd. Said, if you can stay on my tail for 40 seconds, I'll pay you $1,000. Never happened. Never happened. He knew it so intimately and understood the physics of flight and aerodynamics. And then he wrote papers. And of course, a lot of people hated him because he was always right. And you read his biography, and it's a great story. But then at the end of the biography, there's an explanation of analysis and synthesis, what we talked about, destruction and creation, what the OODA loop is and how to apply it, and some of his writings on his concept of destruction and creation, multi-level, non-linear thinking. It's a great read.
So share our videos, like them, subscribe to our channel, and comment on them as well. I'm John Beaudin.